Today's guest, Christin from wefox.
Very hot topic. Also, I mean, if you look into all the communities, if you look into LinkedIn, it's one of the hot topics, right? How to deal with those things. Being very transparent, it's a case-to-case conversation. It's a case-to-case conversation. But I also believe, or I can see that there is a slight change of mindset towards really realizing that those internal developments, of course, also need to come with an internal development of your package, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Of your compensation package. And I think also here again, TA can play a great role.
Yeah, to just
making a case. It's an easy case, right? If you sit down really looking into the numbers, it's all about money in the end, right?
Christine and I know each other from the Berlin talent acquisition bubble and ecosystem, and she spent more than 7 years at one of the biggest TA teams at Deutsche Bahn, where she then got really excited to get to know the startup and scale-up scene and directly jump into the hypergrowth phase of wefox in 2021, and is now leading talent acquisition and employer branding. And we talked about many things like the employer value proposition, culture, internal mobility, how to structure and scale certain functions, teams when they go internationally, and also about the scaling of a function.
Then you can build trust, and then you can spend less time communicating and more time just getting shit done.
Then I went home and thought about this sentence.
We basically put it on the table.
Hiring takes time. People are trained.
How to objectively judge certain situations.
It's very hard to change things.
That was the learning
Entrepreneurs with
to
empathy.
the people side.
Hey Christine, how are you today?
Hi, Thomas. I'm good. Thank you.
We are here from the wefox office at the day
Yes.
where we have the new funding round announced, I guess.
That's very coincidentally, actually, that you're here where we have such good news, actually, for today. Good to have you as a guest, for sure.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me. And for the timing, it was also perfect. So maybe we already know each other, but you could also give the audience a bit more context about your background, what shaped you most, and who you are.
I can most likely do that. I'm Christin. As Thomas said, we're sitting here in the wefox office today, and this is also, what I'm doing here at wefox. I have the nice task to bring people on board for wefox, to look and attract new talent. So my role here is I am head of talent acquisition and employer branding. And as I was just talking to my colleagues earlier today, I'm doing that now for a bit more than 1.5 years. And it feels a lot longer, actually, because time in a very fast-moving environment somehow feels stretched.
Yes.
So I was like, it's only 1.5 years, but it feels like... we are really a big part of wefox.
And
already.
you also had hypergrowth during that 1.5 years period, I guess.
Yes.
Permanently.
I think that contributed to that feeling of that being a long time. So when I entered wefox in 21, we were right in the middle of a hypergrowth phase.
And how many employees back then?
Back then, we were around 1,100 employees. So far, or by now, I mean, we've been going through some phases since then. We are around 1,380 employees.
And also across several markets, right? That's also a bit
Yes.
complex. So how many markets do you currently
8
have live?
locations.
8.
8 locations within Europe.
Uh-huh.
But also, and this is a bit, let's say, also special challenge that we have here at wefox. We are an insurtech company, which you can tell by the word already, is combining two worlds with each other. So the very traditional and I would say also sometimes a bit conservative insurance world, but also the technology world. And this is for us in talent acquisition also the challenge to attract talent from both worlds and combine it here at wefox to something, that is even more exciting.
What is then the biggest volume you need to hire for?
Tech, actually. So in that hypergrowth phase, that was mostly tech and product talent. Here we have a big focus in the Spanish market, together with also the Berlin market, actually. And looking back into that hypergrowth phase, it was also based on customer and sales roles. So of course, insurances also need to be sold. So this is also profiles, or these were
Is it
profiles
then
that we were looking
the
into.
typical insurance broker, how I can imagine it from the more traditional companies? Or is it a different
We're also
profile?
looking for those profiles, yeah. So a very wide range of sales profiles. And in addition to that, also all the very classical profiles that you need. So of course, we were also looking for legal experts, for marketing experts, and so on. So really a wide range of profiles that we've been recruiting. Interesting hypergrowth time.
And what did you do before?
Yeah, so with wefox, I jumped a bit into the cold water of start and scale up. I was really hungry for that, actually, because I was coming from a very different environment before. I was a bit longer than 7 years, actually, with Deutsche Bahn, which is the German railway company, big corporate, over 300,000 employees. And I was coming from a very big TA organization. So I was doing their TA since I started my times at DB, with a team of 800 TA experts, so huge. And that was quite a difference and quite a challenge then to join the very other environment. I mean, TA experts or people in TA know that, of course, some things will always remain the same, right? Relationships to candidates, relationships to hiring managers, but the environment was very different.
How would you describe it in comparison to wefox?
At wefox, we are, and when I start from my own TA team, very international team. Our corporate language is English. Where, as you said, right, we're operating in different markets, and we always try to have a really global view on things. What we do, how can we use that for all of the markets that we operate in? It's also very fast, right? Fast decision making, fast pace. As you said, hypergrowth.
Doing things in parallel.
Doing things
Too
in
much,
parallel,
sometimes.
yeah. So too much, yeah, sometimes. And in comparison to that, DB was, of course, a company where processes were really well set up, where there was a lot of structure, where also decisions, because of that structure, took longer, actually. Very, very, very different in terms of pace, I would say. Like thinking back, that pace, I would say, is the one thing that really made the difference.
Also, the time to hire, is it also varying?
I would say, yes, time to hire, but also, and this is, let's say, one of the things that we also, in our pre-conversation, touched, also then time to actually have the person on board. So at wefox, time to hire, and then having the person here in the office.
Like the time to start?
Time to start sometimes, and luckily goes super quick. Needs a longer time when you're in a big corporate. So until the contract is made, right?
Because of the whole admin process.
Yes, because of the whole admin process. And also, I mean, and that is, of course, both things compared to each other, how known the company is in the market. In Germany, and I think also in the whole DACH region, DB, it's a very well-known brand, a very well-known employer as well, where we were in no situation where we had to explain this is what we're doing at DB. But with wefox is usually also the question when we approach candidates, what are you doing? So what are you hiring for? What is your mission? So also, awareness in the market for the brand is really different.
In case you like my show, please subscribe. I would really appreciate it.
Would you say that's a big impact on hiring in terms of constraints, or even seeing it as an opportunity if it's there, that you have a certain brand that is known on the market, like a strong consumer brand? Or
for sure.
Yeah?
For sure.
What's the difference?
Especially when you're entering new markets, for example. So I'm just thinking back of my the last the last and really exciting role that I had at DB was building up the first cross-border recruiting team. Because of shortage of staff in Germany, we were looking dedicatedly into foreign markets to attract people there and relocate them to Germany. And even markets where DB was not operating in. When we started posting stuff there, when we started we're looking for talent to come to Germany, the brand was known, so the market entry was super easy for us from a talent side, right? It had it made it very easy for us to do so. So that, just to have that, made it easy. On the other hand, it also comes with all the attached, sometimes stereotypes that you bring.
Yeah, I have some in mind.
See, so usually also talent that you're attracting or people that you source are also DB, and it comes with a series.
But
of
maybe it's not
stereotypes.
even like that, right? So maybe it can also be dynamic. I can imagine.
Can be dynamic, and of course is also influenced by what's currently happening.
Yes.
By press or how is let's say that the brand situated in the market, and in comparison to that. Having a new brand on the market with wefox, something that is not so known, of course, always gives the chance to really develop something from scratch, right? And to make a new entry point.
What role does the founder play there in building this brand? Because I think Julian is quite active. You can, at least in the Berlin ecosystem bubble,
he makes it so easy for us on that. Or he's when I started,
big enabler.
Yeah, he's a big enabler. So when I started, he was already very active. So he was not someone that we in TA had to move for our purposes, right? And that is actually something that was very different before. There we had to engage and push hiring managers a lot to also do something on the market, make themselves visible and so on. So here, in our environment now, Julian was doing a great job for us. He was already very well connected, but also visible. And sometimes a bit too fast for us, right? Because it was hard for us to catch up, but very, very helpful in terms of spreading the news as well. And of course, you can see that in conversations, in interviews, people are like, yeah, I've seen the latest interview of this and that. And I know that's not only the case for us at wefox. Me talking to fellow TA leaders with other strong founders, that does help to support or push the brand a lot, actually. So it's really, really helpful.
And was an employer value proposition and so already defined when you joined, or did you build that?
Good, very good topic, or very good question, let's say. So what was there already was a really strong set of values for the company, for employees. So what is the baseline? What are we operating with? So five values. But as wefox was growing in the past also on the basis of certain acquisitions in new markets, that usually makes it a bit more challenging for a unified EVP, let's say. So this is where we invested a lot of work, actually, where we've been working with surveys and still are working, actually, to establish that and to also have that umbrella where everyone can find himself or herself underneath.
What are the 5 values, or were, and are they still the same?
I'm looking around. Unfortunately, we cannot see them because we had them in the offices. This is we communicate clearly. We are team players. We are authentic. We make things possible. And the 5th one,
we find later.
We find later. Hashtag we find later. They all have a hashtag. So it's not on top of my head, so I'll find that out.
Yeah, good.
We can add that.
And we communicate clearly.
We communicate clearly.
How does this translate into your work in talent acquisition?
Actually, having that as a unified, or having those values as a, let's say, really as a baseline for everything that we do, really helps us in the communication internally. When we give feedback to hiring managers, when we give TA training to hiring managers, we tend, and this is also how we announce this, to give very direct feedback. So this is something that we can improve. This is something that we should improve. And of course, having our values as a backup, we do that because this is one of our values, helps us in that internal stakeholder management a lot.
Also with candidates, I guess, right?
So that with the internals, exactly. With candidates, this is something, potentially, let's say one of the main goals for every TA team to be really candidate centric, to be really candidate obsessed, if not even. Of course, we also try to deliver that for the candidates in terms of feedback. And this is one of the things where we have been, although being in a fast developing scale up and startup environment, where we are trying to really push for a sustainable recruitment environment, right? We believe that if we're giving someone good feedback to a process, even though maybe this time it was not a match for us, that person stays in the talent market. And of course, there's always the chance that someone comes back to us later, or that we might be coming back to that person later. As we are developing so fast, right, from a business strategy, from new markets, there's always the chance that a talent that we do not need today is very likely that we need that talent tomorrow. So this is why the whole idea of having sustainable interactions, having talent pools, and also doing that bit more midterm planning became more and more important for us. And we're trying to maintain that, even though being in that fast changing scale-up and startup environment, which is a challenge in daily operations.
Definitely. I see this so often, that companies interview for certain roles and then the candidates maybe would not fit because the role is scoped also very vague or not clear. And then 6 months later, 12 months later, you maybe hire again for a similar field or the same role even. And then I see recruiters going directly, for instance, on LinkedIn and sourcing there. But why not leveraging the internal ATS? Because you can get a lot of good candidates there if you set it up in the right way.
Yes.
Systematically, with tags, with tagging, with also getting consents, with keeping them up to date and so on. That's an asset.
Yeah. And I mean, the thing is, you know that the whole idea of talent pools is not a new idea. It's not a new concept, but it's very rare that you find a team or a company that does it really well.
Yes.
Because it's always that step of doing effort now for something that doesn't pay off immediately, but in the future. And especially in that, let's say, very fast developing time also that we're in, people do not tend to make that extra effort now. That only pays off in a second step. So is one of the things we are working on, and something wherever I'm in network meetings and so on, I'm always trying to gather, how are you doing that? What is your take on that?
And what's your approach on doing the relationship management with the candidates, or talent pooling, however you want to call it?
So we at wefox, we identified some critical, only a few, I have to say, because we wanted to focus on a few areas first to be able to make it right. So we identified a few focus area where we said we open speculative pipelines for those jobs. So this is, we even go out into the market, not searching for a specific job, but saying, look, if you bring experience in that area, we're super happy to get into a conversation with you. So we really go out into the market with that, and then use our ATS to pool the candidates. And then when opening a new job, adding that as a first go-to source, right? So what do we have here already? And that actually is something that also in the collaboration with hiring managers really brought us a lot of trust to say, look, when opening a new role, let's already look into some profiles to see, Thomas, my hiring manager, is that going to the right direction?
To calibrate.
To calibrate, to get first feedback. So we started, there's still a lot of room for improvement, I have to say, but we started with some key areas to go out and made some first good steps. I've been doing that on a much bigger scale in the past, actually, but the key, I think, is engagement over time, right? You have candidates in a pool. If they didn't hear from you for a longer time, they lose interest. So you have to engage them, send like content even, right? And here and there a bit of a nudge to say like, we're
Maybe
still
also
there.
invite them to the office sometimes,
We're
right?
still there, yeah. And this is something, I mean, the whole thing, community management, right? We've also been talking about thinking of recruitment more as a broader concept. So what are the touch points that you can connect, working with communities? So that community of prospect candidates, but also on the other end of the spectrum, working with an alumni network of Foxies, actually, as we have
you
it
call them
here.
Foxies?
Yes. Like our employees, we call ourselves Foxies. And of course, and the claim of our alumni network is once a Foxy, always a Foxy. So when you just said like inviting them to the office, this is, for example, what we do with alumni. So once in a while, we invite to our main offices and send out, invite to former colleagues to say, look, time for a beer again. Nothing super sophisticated, just time to come together, share a bit updates, what has been going on at wefox for the last time, and bring them together. And that actually already led to some boomerang hires, where we said, look, people gained really great experience outside at wefox and now would be interested to come back in. It's a great deal for us, right?
Yeah, definitely. They know the culture a bit.
Yeah.
They know the context.
Yeah.
Faster up to speed. Maybe already have some relationships.
But again, it's like, and this is sometimes also not so easy to convince internally, as well as someone out of TA to make that effort now. Why would we invest in people that already left us? But to have then that gain in the second step. So thinking that a bit more, I usually say like having that sustainable approach, right? Do a bit of broader view on the whole talent attraction topic.
And the whole talent pooling topic, how does this also buy into or add up to your employer value proposition? And how would you describe your value proposition, how you want to position yourself as employer?
What we are trying with all the actions that we are doing with our employer branding activities, but also with every touch point that we as a TA team have with the internal or with the external world, more to say, is like offering a window into the wefox world. This is what we want to do. So really delivering an authentic view into what is happening here. So ideally, along the touch points, along the process, you get a really good feeling what it will be working at wefox. What is it that I'm signing up for? This is for us very important to also, focus on attrition, for example, right? To get people in that make a good and valid decision and also stay with us, right? So having that, coming back to my window, offering a window into the company to say like, what is it really about working at wefox? This is basically the core of what everything else is aligned to, and where we're also trying to challenge ourselves into. Of course, that window, looking through that window, looks a bit different if I'm looking or speaking to a TA person in Italy, because of course for example, it always has a local flavor. Office in Italy looks different, right? Also, the culture is.
And you also sponsor a very cool office football club.
We do.
But also here in Germany.
In Germany.
Berlin is also like Union Berlin, yeah.
But also has a bit of a different culture, right? They do things in the office a bit differently. So for us, that
what's an example? What they do differently?
More
coffee in Italy? More espresso?
Better coffee. But also they tend to be in the office a lot more. And this is...
Is it in Milano?
Yes, it's in Milano, and it's both-sided actually. The management wants the employees to be in the office a lot more, but also the employees like to be in the office a lot more, which is very different to what we find, for example, in Berlin.
And Spain? How is Spain?
Berlin hybrid is super popular. In Spain, a bit according to the like focus on profiles that we have there, it's our tech hub. We also have a decent amount of employees that really wish for the remote setup. But also they're really keen on having event-based office time. So coming together as a team to have pizza nights, to have...
Is it in Barcelona or in Madrid?
Barcelona, yeah, to have like technical exchange as well. So for them, it's not so important to be in the office like every day, but coming together event-based. And that, you should always reflect that in the process, right? So the EVP for us is like the golden thread that is keeping everything together. What's the unifying thing at wefox? But it always should have that local flavor, so you can really represent what's going on in the office that I will be working in. So, yeah, we have local flavors, local differences. But
are you always around in all the offices?
Finding that core. Always around would be an exaggeration.
But here and there?
Yeah.
To Barcelona in the summer?
And it's hot, yeah. So we're going to Milan in a bit as a people leader team to come together. And I think it's very important. You don't get a feeling for the culture. You don't get a feeling for a market just from the screen. And like over an Italian coffee, also more secrets around everything is shared, right? So it's more easy to really connect with the people. So yes, it is important. Yeah.
Well, first, you said you really wanted badly to join this startup environment. Why? What was the...
I had itchy feet. I was like, I started that huge corporate life very young in my career, and then I was there for 7 years, and I realized is one of the biggest TA teams around
in the world.
Actually, yes. Potentially, yes.
Yeah, it's
potentially,
quite huge.
Yes, it's huge. And I learned so much, and I was like super thankful for all the like experiences and all the learnings that I was able to do there. But I was like, and especially in Berlin, right? You are in the middle of something so big when you look at the whole startup ecosystem, right? And you get all the... So what's going on there? How is it really? I had no idea, actually. I had no touch point before. So I really had itchy feet. I'm like, I'm just curious. What is out there? What is outside this big corporate world? So I think curiosity was the biggest driver, actually, to do that. And this is also, how I then landed with wefox after a couple of conversations.
And also, I think the whole internal mobility piece is very, very different at a huge organization and also way more impactful, that you can also move around way easier or more often, or internal hires just make more sense because the organization is more of a headcount size. And how do you do that at wefox? Because you're already at a decent size of 1,300 roughly. You can already do internal mobility stuff. And I think now, especially in the environment with more capital efficient growth and not always first impulse is hiring externally. How do you set it up here?
Yeah. So that was one of the projects, let's say, very close to my TA heart as well, because in a big setup that I was before, it was very separated as well. So recruiting from the external market was one thing, TA was one thing, and then you had like a whole different team responsible for like succession planning, internal movements, and so on. Of course, here in the smaller setup, everything is a lot more interconnected, and it was really cool, or I found it really cool, that we as a TA team had been able to launch that internal mobility concept into wefox. Because
how does the concept look like?
Because TA was a big driver for that, right? We just noticed actually that internal people, like our colleagues basically, right, were, because we had more and more initiatives and more visibility as a TA team, they also more and more noticed what are the possibilities. There's so many roles out there. Is there something, if I want to change, is there something in it for me? So they were naturally approaching us, right? Because we are like the ones with the access to the job market internally, basically. So very simple first step, a process needed to be defined, right?
But it came out of a demand.
came out of the demand because they were approaching
That's
us.
good sign.
Right? They were approaching us with interest, and also we realized once we had someone where business and internal candidate agreed, then what? How to process that candidate, how to bring him into the new spot. There was nothing...
It sounds so simple, right? There is already somebody working internally. Why can they just not take another job? It's not so simple.
It's not so simple, especially not when different locations are involved, right?
Yeah, different departments as well sometimes.
Different
budgets
departments,
and everything.
different legal entities, and sometimes different countries, right? If relocation is involved. Usually it's also about the costs. Who's paying for someone that wants to relocate internally?
And why paying for someone but maybe not for another one?
Exactly.
In case you have any feedback or anything you want to share with me, please send me an email on thomas@peoplewise.com or hit me up on LinkedIn. And in case you really enjoy the show, please subscribe. I would really appreciate it.
And it's also a lot having those, but this is really valuable, I think, to have those internal conversations about why is it good and why does it pay off in the end to keep internal talent, and why does it pay off to develop people internally?
Why do you think it pays off?
Because it really pays into culture. It really pays into culture when you are able to... when you have an authentic interest of supporting individuals in their career. If you show authentic interest and also effort to actually look at the things more holistically and not just, I have a job to do, throw me someone at it who can do it, right? So it has a lot more of a people-centric approach to it. And I feel and I see that also, that employees do realize that if you're offering something for that. As a really nice add-on effect, it also is a great selling point on the external market, right? If you say, look, we're also internally offering international job options, right? If you want to really develop. Because is one of the also number one questions in interviews when it comes to benefits, how is my development plan once I'm here? Are there even options to develop and so on? So I think that as a company of our size can really make a difference if you're already able to offer that to also make a difference to other competitors, I would say. And as you were asking, how does the concept look like? So we started with just a process, right? So once the decision is made, how is it done? Second point was to communicate it properly, to give people access to the internal job market and set up certain rules. So that means, Thomas, dear hiring manager, no headhunting. So now that we have that, that doesn't mean that you call up all the high performers and say, do you want to work for my team, right? But develop a certain understanding internally. So really interesting conversations.
So drafting out the description of the job, and maybe before it goes live externally, you post it internally, and then you have a time of 1 week to see how is the resonance, for instance, and then move forward, or?
You described it quite well. Yeah. That's how it would work. And also having some guidelines to it as to when equally qualified, we prefer the internal candidate, right? And that we also expect from our leaders to support the internal mobility concept.
What I always see or hear is that some people, they don't then want to interview externally if they want somebody internally. Do you also accept this? Or is there a certain criteria that needs to be met that you can just directly go for the one-shot internal employee because it fits so perfectly well, or the hiring manager wants it so badly and the employee as well, that you don't even compare with interviews to go for a regular process? Do you also do that? Or
if it's like internally only, if he has like someone in mind to do that, I think from my perspective, and this is also how we did set it up, I always call it like no behind closed doors policy. Mm-hmm. So even for like those internal transitions, we're aiming to have a process, right?
Yes. And document it at least and so on, right?
Exactly. And to make it like obvious and transparent for the rest of the company, we're looking to fill that position so that at least other talents have the chance to, as you would say in German, throw their head, right? And say like, look, I would be interested. And sometimes, and luckily it happened already, you're positively surprised as a manager who suddenly shows up and shows interest for the role, right? You also learn a lot about your internal workforce on those things.
How about confidentiality?
And
Because
acceptance.
sometimes the current manager maybe doesn't want to know that somebody from his or her team applies somewhere else. That's also tricky.
It's also a great question. So how we had so many conversations about how to do that actually. So we have in our defined process at one point the TA partner is basically having the final check-up also with the candidate and says, look, in the next step, it becomes a bit more transparent. So this is the point of no return now. If you want to move on, we would really recommend you to talk to your current manager.
And the person should
and
do
in
it by themselves.
95% of the cases, that also then happened,
Yes.
right? Because they take it seriously. And also we try to educate a bit that a relationship with your current manager will, of course, stay even when you're in a new role. You will be in a different scenario.
It's also a bit about maturity, right? That
Exactly.
you should not get too emotional about it. Of course, sometimes it's hard.
Sometimes it's hard, but here I also see like a TA team as a great,
I think it's also a bit about confidence to say, okay, it's part of the game. We need to move on and we find a solution, right?
we find a solution, but also like I see the TA team here usually as a great empowerer for those things, to educate around it. What can happen worst case? And to also show hiring managers on both ends, the worst case is not so bad because we support you to then fill your vacancy. And this is also the advantages that you have from it. So I think it's all about like showing the bigger picture for everyone that in the end, it pays off for us. But yeah, internal campaigning is needed, let's say, for those kind of things.
And compensation then, how do you make sure that this is also considered in the right way? Because I think this is something what can get really complicated. Do you also give big raises then when the job specification of the new job versus the old role, when there is a big gap? Because this is what I saw often, that if you hire externally, it's way easier to make the decision to just give 15,000 more, for instance, than when somebody internally would move.
It's a very hot topic. Also, I mean, if you look into all the communities, if you look into LinkedIn, it's one of the hot topics, right? How to deal with those things. Being very transparent, it's a case-to-case conversation. It's a case-to-case conversation. But I also believe, or I can see that there is a slight change of mindset towards really realizing that those internal developments, of course, also need to come with an internal development of your package, right?
Yeah,
of your
definitely.
compensation package. And that, and I think also here again, TA can play a great role.
Yeah, to just
Making a case. It's an easy case, right? If you sit down really looking into the numbers, it's all about money in the end, right? You can make a great case, and it's an easy one actually to just say how much hiring externally with all the costs
You would
attached
save.
to it would
Yeah.
do. You still save, right?
But also looking into the market and listen a bit into what's the salaries out there. And I think this also needs to be regularly considered, but I always recommend people in any level, regular interview, and sometimes just doing a first call, or also sometimes going to offers, just to see what's your market value currently for your role. It's a good idea. It can be time consuming, but doing it at least 1 to 2 times a year, I think is very, very healthy.
Yeah.
If you want to progress in your career.
Yeah.
And if you know what's out there for you or not. I think it helps, but it's also time consuming for the recruiters, but also for the candidates.
You see me smiling, right? On the other hand, because what I also love about my job in TA, that a lot of people have from their processes at the very beginning, a lot of kind of a trusted relationship with you. So people tend to tell you a lot also internally, right? So I just had the conversation last week with someone that says like, look, I don't know if I'm allowed to tell you, but I do go to interviews all the time just to keep practicing. I said like, and he was almost like afraid to tell me. I'm like, this is good that you do that, right? It also like just to keep you fresh and on your toes, and also to see what's out there on the market. And then also, if you make a conscious decision to stay where you are, even better,
Yes.
right? Because then you do it with all of your
Yes.
heart.
And sometimes you even appreciate your job more.
So exactly. So this is why. So people are sometimes almost afraid to say that, but I'm like, go and do that.
And it's always good to have options, of course.
Exactly. And I mean, in from a TA perspective, it even has that checking out what the competitor does perspective sometimes,
Yes.
right? To say like, and it's just also always a great event if two TA people meet and exchange about stuff. Yeah. So I agree.
Okay. Do you have any final words?
Final words.
Yeah.
You didn't prepare me for that one, so that is.
I also have another question I did not prepare you for.
Good. Final words, closing. I mean, I really love what I'm doing. I'm really passionate about TA.
I can hear that. That's good.
That whole, let's say, is something that I really appreciated also here in my time now at wefox, developing that broader perspective of things, how things are interconnected. And I see TA as a great driver for a lot of things that are happening within a company that are beyond the first TA responsibilities I see. And I can only encourage everyone to, explore and also test those boundaries of what you can do and to not stop on the touch points or on the natural handovers to other teams internally, but to always make sure it's running like a smooth machine. Yeah.
Any recommendations to guests? I don't know, but you know who I should interview as well.
I think Charlotte would be a great, my dear ex-colleague, Charlotte, she's now the director of talent acquisition at Dr. Lip. Would be an amazing interview partner, actually.
Why not?
And I'm pretty sure she would also love the invite. She comes from an active sourcing background.
So we can deep dive there.
You can deep dive there for sure, and you can deep dive on female networks and a lot of very interesting topics. So she's the first one that comes to my mind. She would be a great deal.
Yes, if you want, you can make an intro and then I sign her up.
Will do. Good. Charlotte, Thomas is coming. Yeah.
Yes. Now I'm sourcing live on the show.
Nice.
Okay, yeah, thank you. It was a pleasure.
Cool. Thank you for being here, Thomas.
Yeah.
Cool.